Louise Bedford is one of Australia's leading voices in trading psychology and behavioural finance. She's a trader, mentor, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of 6 books. And for more than 3 decades, she has helped thousands of people understand not only how markets work, but how they themselves work under pressure. Now, Louise has degrees in psychology and business. She's founded the long running Trading Game Mentor program and is known for combining practical strategy with a deep understanding of human behavior, decision making, and mindset. Today, though, we're going beyond trading charts and market movements because Louise's work sits right at the intersection of identity, uncertainty, reinvention, and how we navigate life when things don't go to plan. Welcome to The Brain Changers, a podcast about learning how to revolutionize the way you think and live by mastering your mind. We're your hosts, mother and daughter duo Rebecca and Yvonne King from Moonbeam Monday. Our goal is to empower you to live the life you choose by teaching you how to retrain your brain. Some people tell us it sounds like mind control, and it is, but not the way you might think. This is about you taking control of your own mind rather than letting your mind control you, so you can choose to live a life free from the expectations of others. No matter what you've experienced in the past, you can create positive change and transformation by learning how to master your mind. We know this because we've done it. Between us, we've survived cancer and stroke and eliminated debilitating anxiety and depression. We've turned our pain into purpose through the power of our mind, and we're now here to support and guide you to do the same. In this podcast, we share valuable insights about how your brain works, why you think, say, and do the things you do, how to begin the process of change, and why it's necessary. Because we know that when you change your mind, you change your life. Thanks for joining us. Let's go. Louise, welcome to the Brain Changers podcast.
It's so great to see you again, Beck. I do enjoy your company.
Oh, thank you, Louise. It's great to have you here. Been wanting to have you on the Brain Changers for a while. Yvonne, as everybody knows, is my mum, has been saying, let's get Louise on. And even though she's not here with us today, she certainly is in spirit. But Louise, before we get into reinvention and identity and all those things that we plan to talk about, I firstly want to start by acknowledging that this is actually the 50th episode of the Brain Changers podcast. So, big celebration for us. And really how excited we are to have you as the guest for this episode in particular, because you are partly responsible for this. So, not for having a podcast specifically, but for the direction that Yvonne and I have taken in our lives. And I'd like to explain that a little bit for our listeners. It started years ago, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, perhaps, I'm not sure. Yvonne was enrolled in your course or your mentor program. And through this, you introduced her to Rick Schnabel from Life Beyond Limits, because to trade, you need a very particular mindset, a very strong mindset, I imagine. And Rick is, of course, an expert mindset coach. And he is also an NLP trainer. And a very long story short, Rick became Yvonne's coach and NLP trainer, and in time, my coach and trainer, which ultimately not only changed my life dramatically from where I was at the time, but I truly believe saved my life. And it led us to launch Moonbeam Monday training and coaching. So it completely changed the direction of our lives. So thank you.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear. And I just think the world of you and Yvonne and all of the changes that you've gone through and the mindset expansion that you've been able to tolerate because it's uncomfortable. Oh, my hat goes off to you.
Oh, thank you, Louise. Thank you. We really appreciate that. And honestly, thank you doesn't seem like a big enough word. But I guess I wanted our audience to know that, because this seemingly small introduction had a massive impact on the two of us. And I'm very proud to say, in turn, the people that we now help. So I guess that kind of leads me into my first question for you. Did you ever have moments in your own life where a seemingly small decision or conversation ended up changing everything for you?
Mm, absolutely. So, one of the things that comes to mind with that question is when I was 4 years old, I had three older sisters, and I still do, and they're fantastic, but they could all water ski. And I desperately wanted to water ski. It was my total ambition in the world. And they were all saying, "You can do it." And the instruction was hold on to the rope, the ski handle, and do not let go. You are going to feel like your arms are going to be ripped out of their sockets. Your legs will be burning. There'll be water. You'll be feeling like you're drowning. But if you hold on, you'll be able to ski. So I followed these instructions and the boat started up and I said, okay, the boat took off. My skis fell off, but I still held on like a champion and half drowned myself. One cannot ski without skis when you're learning
No.
and beginning. Yes. So I think that moment, which I've actually never told people in public, with
Okay,
this
thank you. Thank you for sharing.
that moment really reinforced that I was incredibly persistent and that I
Mm.
was disciplined and determined and could follow instructions and would not give up. And I have to say, the number of times in my family when that story came back, where, oh, she's so stubborn, she's so stubborn. Do you remember that time when she was 4 years old? I actually think that shaped who I am today because you often emerge into your own identity, and that identity becomes so important to us to maintain. And that was my identity. So I think that followed through when I first got my 2 degrees, when I got my first job, when I had to leave my first job because of an awful health issue that took away the use of my arms, when I was learning how to use my arms again over the next 5 years after that event, and when I was trading with a pen in my mouth so that I could punch in the orders to the computer. Now,
Oh,
all of those subsequent aspects of my life, they were really defined by the discipline and determination that I had when I was just 4 years old. So I think sometimes life changes in whispers, not always in explosions.
yes. Oh, wow. What a very powerful statement. I think that so many of us expect that these changes in our life or these aha moments are going to come like a lightning bolt, right? I know even people that I work with, they're like, oh, I'm expecting that we're going to have this session, we're going to go through this process, this technique, and I'm going to feel like, bang, something's completely changed or shifted. But like you say, it's more of a it's a whisper. It's a sometimes a slow or sometimes a very quiet change that we are able to look back at in retrospect and go, "Ah, I see that now. I see the difference. I see the change." That was a fantastic analogy, Louise, the water skiing. I know that this happened to you in real life, but the analogy of somebody telling you, hold on for dear life, do not let go, whatever you do. We often do that, don't we? And yet things change as we go. Like things don't always go to plan. And I think that's a really nice segue to ask you about that. And you've sort of alluded to this a little bit, but you've built an incredible career, Louise, not only with trading, but of course, there were things before trading. But underneath every successful career, there are usually these moments where life deviates from that so called plan. We can have a strategy, we can have goals, but it doesn't always go the way that we are hoping. So I'm quite sure there was a point for you where life took a direction that you didn't expect. And I'd love to hear about that. What was that moment where you thought, "Oh, this this isn't going how I'd planned?"
Yeah, there were a few moments actually, but the first one was definitely when I was on a beautiful career trajectory. My job was just flying high. I was the very much ego driven, money driven type of mindset. And unfortunately for me, my body hadn't got the memo that working so hard was a good idea. In just 2 short weeks, I lost use of both of my arms. And it was so traumatic. And I was a national manager, and there was no loyalty back to me. So I brought a carer into work until they stopped letting the carer come in because we were dealing with confidential credit information. I couldn't work. And
Yeah.
that complete shift, it was literally completely stepping out of the thing that I thought I wanted most and into oblivion, what I thought was oblivion. That was such a shock to me. That health crisis where I lost my job. I was unable to imagine a future where I could work again, where I'd become a share trader because that was the only thing that I knew how to do. I'd already been trading alongside my job for the first 5 years, 6 years of my career. So by the time I left it, I knew a little bit, but I wasn't ready to be a full time share trader at all. However, it was the only thing I could do without arms. So
Mhm.
I do think with things like this, it can knock us for a six, and you find out who you really are. Do you have a core of steel? Are you actually solid without all of the physical entrapments of wealth? Do you actually like who you are? Because without knowing yourself and without liking who you are, it's very difficult to progress. I think sometimes reality does not owe us compliance to our dreams. Reality can smash those in an instant. So having an ability to dig a well before you're thirsty is so important. Having different streams of wealth, different abilities to be able to slip into other identities, not to rely on one source for validation. All of those aspects came into play at that stage, Beck.
Wow, I can't even imagine. I think we've all had big moments in our life, some bigger than others, but not to have the use of your arms when it I can't even imagine what that's like, and then not to have that support from your workplace. I can only imagine how difficult that was. You talked a bit about identity, like, there's so much in there I feel like I want to unpack there, Louise, but you talked about identity a lot, which, of course, is what we really wanted to touch on today. There might be a question that a lot of the listeners are thinking here is, that was quite an obvious change for you, but not all of the changes are obvious. We're even talking about that with the previous question. It's not always an explosion, it's a whisper. But for those where it's a little quieter, how do you know when you've outgrown a version of yourself when it doesn't explode like that?
Hmm. One of the tells, I think, is when we look at our own behavior, if we're starting to self sabotage. Now, there's an aspect of self sabotage, it's kind of a precursor to self sabotage called SAD behavior. What it is self aggressive, destructive behavior. Now, it could be that on a given day that you're feeling upset, so you reach for a chocolate bar, which is my source of sustenance in those times. It could be that
I think a lot of
maybe
people can relate.
just saying.
Yeah.
It could be that in pressure, you go running, but you run far too far and you hurt yourself. It could be that you decide to gamble or buy online or maybe even have an affair. Maybe there's something there that is a small, perhaps even a large precursor to you actually hurting yourself because
Mm.
that person is no longer representing who you want to be. Now, I think with this, it can be difficult to translate that unless you have a friend who can say, hey, what's up? What's going on? Sometimes it's hard for us to see that in ourselves. So, tools like journaling, writing down your thoughts, going to a therapist and making sure that you deal with that before it becomes a problem. Having a friend who's an unreasonable friend who can say, hey, do you realize this? In your behavior, having somebody to notice in the first place, what a relief when somebody can actually point out our own behavior to us, because often we need to leave behind the person that we were to emerge into the person that we want to become. And I do feel that growth often can feel like grief in disguise.
I agree with you 100%. It can be very difficult to leave that person behind, because of course we have created that identity over a long period of time. Even since we were a child, 70% of our identity is already formed by the time we are 7, because of the values and the beliefs that we absorb from our parents, our caregivers, and the world around us. So that person has been with us for a very, very long time. So I completely understand how you say that can be a form of grief. It's almost like saying goodbye to that person that we have been or thought that we were, in order to become the person we want to be. Why is it, do you think, that people stay attached to those versions for so long? What's your thoughts on that?
It's definitely familiarity. You know,
Mm.
sometimes when we're leaping into the unknown, it can feel like a dangerous leap. Now, I'm going to murder some Italian here, but there's an Italian saying, salto mortale, which apparently, if you pronounce that properly, is called dangerous leap. So, our dangerous leap into the unknown can feel so much scarier than just clinging on to the previous version of ourselves. And I think sometimes that dangerous leap isn't quite so dangerous. It's just because it feels uncomfortable and we're out of our comfort zone. But that is where the fun is, where the juice of life is often. And that's where you know you're alive as well, because so many of us are so tired and so bored with ourselves. It's just interminable. So
Mm.
that can actually spice up our life as well, finding that area that we want to move towards, even if it is a little bit scary.
It's easy to forget this, but we must remember that is our brain simply doing what it was designed to do, right? To keep us safe, for us to survive. That's the primal instinct in us. And to therefore keep us comfortable, because it knows what the outcome was from doing that last thing, right? So I guess that's why things feel really difficult when we're under pressure. And I know, Louise, in your years of observing and working with people in pressured situations, which I imagine trading and, the career you were talking about before you started trading full time, where uncertainty is just part of everyday life. What patterns do you notice that people fall back into when that pressure rises or becomes almost too much?
Mm. I think pressure, it doesn't create character, but it does reveal it. So it can just
Mhm.
peel you back so that your core is actually on display. So I think when people are feeling under pressure, they seek certainty, they abandon plans, they overreact, they become hypercritical and hyper emotional. They can revert to old coping patterns. And that can be difficult for those of us that have had an ACE childhood. Now, an ACE childhood is where we've had an accumulated trauma. So that can actually come out in our current life, even though you would think we would have emerged beyond it. When we've had trauma in the past, if we've coped by a few different methods, fight, flight, freeze, or the other one is fawn, where we try and placate everybody around us, we'll often revert to those old patterns while we're under pressure. So in
Yes.
trading, people sometimes panic sell, they revenge trade, they ignore their trading plan, they skip their stop losses, they move their stop losses. But in life, it could be avoidance of something that's a big conversation, or
Mm.
people pleasing, or just in the terms of not being true to yourself, trying to escape from situations because it feels uncomfortable. Because pressure really does strip away sophistication. Under pressure, I really feel that we don't rise to our aspirations. We actually fall to our level of conditioning.
Yes, I love that. Actually, I was just thinking about that before you said that. A friend and coach of mine, Jacqueline Brooker, always says that. And it is, we default to that original level. And I think people become more like themselves. Like you said at the beginning, pressure doesn't create character, it reveals it. So perhaps we become more like ourselves than the person that we want to be when we are under pressure. I'm really interested to know, what is revenge trading, Louise? What is a
I've done
revenge
it
trade?
before. What it is, Beck, this is not the way to trade. Okay, this is the exact opposite. Right, you make a loss. you get angry and you are going to show the market who's boss. You are going to teach the market a lesson. So you go on to put on a series of stupid, stupid trades that only hurt you. The market doesn't care because it doesn't have emotions. So it's common.
Oh
It's
my
definitely
goodness.
something that I've seen people do time and time again. And it can become habitual because sometimes out of those revenge trades, you can hit the jackpot and that encourages that
Mm.
trigger and the behavior again. So, yeah, we try to maintain equanimity as a trader where we don't get too perturbed by the wins or the losses. That sort
Mm.
of affect that's flat, that tends to be the best way because that's where objectivity really thrives.
Yeah, I imagine that can be very difficult if you don't go in with the right training from yourself or with the right mindset, of course. And if you are very much affected by that dopamine hit that we get when we win, whether it's getting a like on social media or whether it's winning at a game at the Royal Show or whether it's making money in your trade. And actually, it's one thing I remember from back when Yvonne was doing her course with you, something that's always stuck with me, not the specific words, but she said, I'm working on my plan. It's important that we have a plan and that we stick to it because if you don't stick to the plan, then you don't actually know where you're going to go. And so, have you often noticed with that, do people think perhaps when they're not going as well as they had hoped that they think they've got a strategy problem when what they're really dealing with is a pattern problem?
Sometimes that can happen. So there's three aspects I feel to trading the share market effectively. The first is your system. So your entry, your exit, your position sizing. And that is so important because if you don't have a good trading system, you really are not going to make money. This has to be very sophisticated in its approach. There's no dart throwing in this arena. So system is the first one. Psychology is the other aspect. And that is, have you got the right mindset to trade that particular system? So you could be great at trading medium term, but it might be difficult for you to trade short term. So psychology is the second one. You have to have it matched to your own psychology. And the third one that a lot of people forget about is maintenance. So that is once you do have your portfolio, are you making each little dollar in that portfolio puff as hard as it can so that it's your little worker bee? Now, I think a lot of people forget about maintenance, not only in trading and their portfolio, but also in life. If you've got a career position and it's stripping every piece of joy out of your life, your maintenance routine is going to look very different from somebody who has more balance. So I think having trading as a bit of a metaphor for improving your own world can do beautifully.
Yes, I actually love that. I've written that down, system psychology and maintenance. And I think you're
That's
right.
it.
That goes for anything in our life, that even the coaching programs that I use with people, we have a system that we follow. Now, of course, there's some flexibility in that depending on the person and what it is that they want to achieve from that. But people come with a different problem, and for those watching the videos, I am using air quotes, come with a different problem, but of course the what people think is the problem often isn't the issue at all. We've got to actually dive under the surface and look for it. And in most cases, it is usually the same or something similar. We're feeling emotionally unsafe, or we are holding on to those traumatic events that you were talking about earlier from childhood. So, of course, we have a system to work on that. The psychology, having the right mindset for growth in any respect. We have to want to address the issue. We have to accept, I think, that we are going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable in order for things to move. So, that growth mindset is very, very important. But then it doesn't, of course, stop with when we have our last coaching session and go, right, well done. You know, you're feeling a lot different. You're working a lot different. See you later. Go back to your old life. No, 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 no. It does require that maintenance, doesn't it? What are the things that have brought you here? and how do you actually maintain this new mindset, this new life, achieving your goals. So I'm going to borrow that if I can, Louise.
Yeah, do
Psychology
that.
major. That is, I think that's, you've almost just given us the key to a successful life there. So thank you. So you've talked about trading a bit, which is kind of where I want to go here. One thing I've always found fascinating about your work is that on the surface, people probably assume trading, like they might switch off, right? And go, oh, trading, oh, that's about markets, charts. I've got to have the technical skills, all of that kind of thing. But the more I've listened to you over the years and some of your other podcasts, the more I've realized it seems to be just as much about understanding people than the technical skills that you need to trade. Because when money and risk and uncertainty, all of those things are involved, human behavior becomes very, very interesting, as we've already been diving into. So, what have years of trading and mentoring taught you about human behavior?
So much, so much. I always adore running my traders through mazes, metaphorically. Having a psychology degree, I think, has been such a big advantage in the markets. But I wanted to mention one thing, it's our money scripts. So, how do
Mm.
we think about money? How do we feel about our worthiness to accept money? Can you give money and can you receive money? And giving money, you would think that it would be the same as receiving, but actually, some people have a bias towards one or the other. So, thinking back to your childhood, even if you had an adverse childhood experience, that ACE childhood, or even if you had a perfect upbringing, you will have absorbed money scripts from the parents or the caregivers around you, and it would be unconscious and conscious. So it's
Mm.
how you think about money, and are you constantly battling yourself? So the real drama with this happens internally. Your fear, your ego, your greed, your impatience, your scarcity versus abundance. That's what fascinates me. And I often think with trading, trading is a mirror with numbers attached. So you will get what you want out of the markets and you'll find a way to make that happen, whether it is actually for your benefit or to your detriment.
Yes, you have really latched on to something there that is prevalent in so many people that I work with as well. And it's one of the first things I remember Rick teaching us and talking about those money scripts. And I love that you said trading is a mirror. This is actually something that we can take over into business or any role in particular, isn't it? And something I've just been doing a lot more work on myself recently because I know that I'm very much a giver and I've always been somebody that loves to give in terms of time, in terms of money. So I have no problem with doing that. But I realized that there was a bit of an issue with the receiving side of things. And so I'm working with a coach again now because as you know, you just peel back one layer and then there's another beautiful layer that wants some attention. And we have to continue working on these things as we go throughout life if we want to continue to grow, which of course all humans generally do. And I had a session with my new coach just a few weeks ago where we addressed this. We started looking at that emotional safety as a child, the relationship that I had with authority figures, and that money script. And I kid you not, the next day, the flow changed. I was contacted by a previous client that said, "Hey, I want to keep working with you." They referred someone to me who by the end of the week had signed up. So it's not only true for trading, it is true in life. I, so yes, you've cottoned on to that pattern that we see a lot. And I imagine that a lot of people listening to you talk about trading in particular and thinking, look, this sounds fascinating, Louise, but it's not for me. I'm not good with numbers. Another story that we tell ourselves, right? I wouldn't know where to begin. I don't have enough money to start trading. So, what do people commonly believe about trading that just simply is not true?
All of that and more. It shocks me how much we get in our own way with this. In some ways, it was good that my back was to the wall so that I had to trade because I was able to translate the charts into a little soap opera. Are the green candles winning or are the red candles winning? And every day it was my role to find out which one was winning. Now, for those of you that don't know about candles, for the listener that is going, what is that? Green is the color of growth. Red is the color of blood. So you can actually see that on a share chart and you can work out, are the bulls, the people who are positive about that market, are they in control or are the bears in control? So I think we tell ourselves all sorts of stories according to where we're at the time, what our health is, what our future self is drawing us towards. It can be about money, relationships, business. It can be where trading exposes this faster because all of a sudden it's you and the market, and you're responsible for your own financial situation. So I think the core points with this is stories are portable. They can come from one area of your life and be transported into a completely irrelevant area. And unless we make that conscious, they can have a hold over us. And identity language is very dangerous. So I am bad at money. I am bad at that is saying that your identity is actually based on that statement rather than sometimes numbers can be a struggle. That is a separation and an observable fact because beliefs can become behaviors. If you believe something at your core, it will transmit into your behavior. And self talk often shapes outcomes. I think a thought repeated often enough starts dressing up as a truth. And that can be a real problem.
Yes. Look, now you are totally speaking my language here. And you're right. What we believe can become our destiny. Or what I see a lot, of course, is I have anxiety. So, of course, we're identifying with, that I am a person with anxiety. So it's like our brain leads with that because it doesn't understand those nuances, does it? It believes what we tell it. So, oh, okay, well, you're bad at math. Let me go and find all the evidence of all the times that you haven't been able to calculate that. Or I have anxiety. Yes, let me go and find all the evidence to show you all the times that you are anxious so that you will believe that about yourself. So I think what I'm hearing here from you, Louise, is that the stories that people tell themselves about trading are actually bigger than trading. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So with that, and hence why when people come through your mentor program, you're not just teaching them about trading, you are teaching them about human behavior.
And the thing with mentoring as well is because I stick with my traders for life, I only take on a small group at a time, but this is ongoing support that I offer. So I know that some of your listeners may be curious about that and maybe they'd even like to chat with me. So you'd be welcome to fill out this survey and it's survey.tradinggame.com.au. Survey.tradinggame.com.au. So fill out the survey. It'll teach me a little bit more about where you're at, and you can book a time to have a chat with me so that we can see whether trading is in your future.
Fantastic. And I will, of course, drop that link in the show notes and all the other ways to get in touch with Louise. And that's all it takes, really, isn't it? It's reaching out for a conversation. And people might be looking at trading for a whole range of different things. It might be something simply that they've been interested in the past and they want to pursue it. It might be needing an additional income. It could be any number of those. So absolutely, please reach out to Louise through that survey to see if it's the right fit. And I guess that's a version of asking for help, isn't it, Louise? So, what do you think stops people from asking for help sooner rather than later?
Often pride. They think they can do it themselves. Look, you probably can, but it's going to take you a lot longer. With anything in the world, I would rather shortcut my process by having a mentor than having to nut it out myself and going down YouTube rabbit holes. But I think also fear and shame comes into the case as well, where people often don't ask for help because they think they're the only ones facing that problem. They feel that sense of isolation. So, how could anybody else understand? But I have to say, reaching out for help, I think it's a form of intelligence.
Mm.
Struggling alone is just not a badge of honor.
So, Louise, for someone listening right now who feels that they are in that uncomfortable middle stage, like if we're talking about identity, that they're looking at, well, this is who I want to be, or this is where I want to go, but this is who I am at the moment. They don't feel that they fit anymore, and perhaps questioning where they're going. What is it that you would want them to remember or to think about?
Often we overestimate what we can achieve in the short term, but underestimate what we can achieve in the long term. So I think having a big goal is terrific, but it can daunt you. What you want to do is break that goal down into the tiniest little chunk that you can do almost immediately, because that gives you a confidence to be able to move forward with the next chunk. I often think it's almost like we're in the dark and we have a spotlight and we can only venture to the edge of where that spotlight is before we can move the spotlight. So I think that uncertainty that we feel when we're in line with a big goal, that is so common. There's a concept called the Kafka effect, and it was named after a poet. For those of us that have an English literature degree, oh my gosh, yes, I can't actually get it out of my head with things like this. But Kafka named the fog that sets in before you complete a big project. You can either push through that fog and it will give way eventually if you keep on walking, or you can step back and go back to where you went from in the first place. So I think the Kafka effect is such a beautiful thing to consider. When you hit resistance, when things seem too hard, when you're nearly there and you can taste it, but you don't know if you can get there, that's the Kafka effect. And you've got a choice. You're at a crossroads. You can either keep moving or you can retreat. And the choice is up to you, but make it a conscious choice. Don't just do it because that's what your early programming said for you to do. I think with clarity, it's often the reward for movement forward.
So, yes, absolutely love that advice from you, Louise, for people to remember that by all means have those big, audacious goals. They are exciting, they're important to have, and something that I have learned more and more even recently is it's what eating the frog, right? Feel the fear and do it anyway. Set the big audacious goal and then work backwards from that. Go, what are three things I can do in the next week that are just going to move me a little bit closer? Because that motivation comes from taking action, right? We don't, if you're sitting there waiting for motivation to do something, whether it's to find out more about trading, whether it's to apply for a new job, whether it's renovating your kitchen, whatever it might be, the motivation is going to come from taking action, not from waiting for it. Okay. So, as we bring things to a close today, Louise, I have five final fast questions that I would love to ask you if you're up for the challenge. So, number one is one belief that you've changed your mind about.
Or hard work doesn't always create wealth.
Oh, okay. I love it. What are you curious about right now?
The AI world and how AI is going to displace some situations and improve others. But what is actually typically our human relationship with our work? Because that's something that AI can't replace.
Yes, and there's a lot of conversation around that at the moment, isn't there? And a lot of people feeling uncertain, thinking that AI is going to replace their job, but there's just so much more to that conversation, isn't there?
That's
Well,
right.
that's why we need to keep up with it. Okay, number three, what's one habit that you wish you'd started earlier?
I wish I had have learned the importance of deep work earlier so that I could work in silence with no interruptions.
Oh, is that even possible? I think it is, isn't it? But clearly, that might be something I need to learn. And what gives you purpose at this stage of life, Louise?
I love the thought that I'm still inspiring people because of what I've achieved. And that ripple effect, that's what gives me energy. So that to me is exactly what I've aimed for since I was 19 when I first wrote that down in my mission statement, to inspire people by living my example of life. So still doing it, still love it.
Fantastic. And yes, you are, and you're having a massive ripple effect as we talked about at the very beginning. And because this is the brain changes, what is one thought that changed your life?
Do what you say you are going to do, regardless of how hard it is, regardless of how you feel. Just do it. If you said you were going to do it, do it.
Oh, that's powerful, isn't it? I mean, there is a company that made a whole slogan around that. So perhaps we should remember that. Just do it. Eat the frog, do the hard thing, whatever it is. Come up with those three things that are going to move you towards your goal. That does bring us to the end of this conversation, Louise. I've had such a good time talking to you. I do want to tell everybody about your podcast as well. Perhaps I'll ask you to talk about your podcast. Do you want to give us a quick idea about what people can expect to hear?
Sure. So come and visit me at Talking Trading, which is my podcast. So I would love you to explore the share market, to hear the success stories when I interview people, to hear positive mindset boosts for your trading day. And even if you're not a trader, but you're just trading curious, that is the place to go. So any of your podcast platforms will have it, Talking Trading, and you can come and visit me at talkingtrading.com.au.
Fantastic. And I highly recommend it, that it's not just talking about training itself. So for anybody that is listening today going, no, that's not for me, get on there and listen, because there's so much about the mindset, how we think, human behavior, as well as trading. So we will drop that link in the show notes as well. And of course, you are listening to the Brain Changes podcast. We love having you here. If you are curious about how your brain works, why you think, say, and do the things you do, this is the place to find out more. And Louise, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a delightful conversation. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Brain Changers. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Our mission is to reach as many people as possible to help them revolutionize the way they think so they can change their brain and create profound transformation. Please help us broaden our reach by sharing this episode with someone you know will benefit. And remember to tag us on socials at Moonbeam Monday and leave a review. And remember, when you change your mind, you change your life. We'll catch you next time for another episode of The Brain Changers.